Welcome to another edition of the Workers Podcast brought to you by the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union. Now, in this episode, we're diving into one of the most powerful tools available to workers, collective bargaining. It's the process through which trade unions achieve better conditions for workers. But how does it really work? What strategies go into preparing for negotiations? And why is the participation of workers so vital to achieving success at the bargaining table? Well, to help us unpack these questions, we're joined by Mr. Fernando Samuel. He's a Senior Industrial Relations Officer here at the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union. With years of experience representing workers and leading negotiations across multiple sectors, Fernando brings a wealth of insight into the art and science of collective bargaining. Mr. Samuel, so happy for you to join us here on the Workers Podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Brother Edgel. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon.
Excellent. Now, I just want us to start off our conversation by sharing with us a brief overview, history of your background in industrial relations. How did you get into this line of work, I might ask?
It's a very interesting question. To be honest, the first 14 years of my formal employment, I worked within the financial sector within a particular bank. Somewhere around the 10th or the 11th year, myself and my colleagues were having some challenges with the institution, and we decided that we required representation. And of course, the best or most suitable organization to be aligned with was the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union. As a result of that, I was the lead negotiator at the time. And unfortunately, when the bank went through acquisition on the 14th of March 2014, I was one of the unfortunate individuals that was placed, quote unquote, on the breadline.
Okay.
Slightly prior to that, at the union's annual delegates conference, I was elected as the treasurer. And I believe during the time of my departure from the bank, the management of the union saw some accolades with me in specific areas in financial analysis. So they did ask me to come in for a few weeks just to look at some financial records, audited statements, just to ensure that the employees were on the up and up. And in a few weeks, I think if my memory serves me correct, the 9th of May 2014, I was offered formal employment here at the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union.
Interesting. So what has that journey been like? And also share with us, what does your day-to-day look like as an industrial relations officer?
It's been a very interesting journey. When I started in 2014, I was not only the elected treasurer, I was also appointed as the youth coordinator at the time, as well as a field officer. I was very green. I was also very eager to learn what I could in regards to industrial relations, because I'm a very passionate individual in regards to workers' rights. I live by a particular mantra that no one else can better represent you than yourself.
Excellent.
Hence the reason I'm always out there in the vanguards. To be quite honest, there's not a typical day for an IR officer for any trade union. More often you come in with a particular scheduled day, meetings, negotiations, grievance handling, and you might have walk-in members, you might have phone calls, so you just got to be very fluid throughout your activities during the day. But some of my general activities on a day-to-day basis would be negotiating, grievance handling, collective bargaining, also representing matters not only at the shop level, but also at the labor department.
Okay, great, excellent. Now, let's come to it. Collective bargaining. When we speak of collective bargaining, what exactly are we talking about? Could you give us a layman's definition, if you will?
Sure. Collective bargaining in layman's terms is the process in which a trade union represents a group of workers in negotiating their terms of reference in regards to employment conditions.
Walk us through now the process. Where does it start and where does it progress to?
I can give you my personal experience in how I handle matters, because each officer has a particular way in which they would negotiate and address the collective bargaining process. One of the first things I look at when I begin to look at the negotiation and the collective bargaining process is to examine the workplace that I have oversight over in regards to what are the industry norms, not only locally, but also regionally and internationally. Once that is done, I seek to have a discussion with the membership at the workplace just to get a true image and a picture of what is going on there at the shop level. And hearing from the team, we sit with the shop stewards, which is a group of employees that is selected by the membership to represent their best interests across the table for management. And we begin to fine-tune the proposals or the ideas that come out of the general staff meeting. Once we fine-tune those ideas, the formal proposals are submitted to management of the company, and then at a mutually agreed date, we then begin the process of quote-unquote negotiation, or as you asked, collective bargaining.
Mm-hmm. How long can that process take in terms of formulating those ideas that will go forward on the negotiating table?
That's a very interesting question. Mm-hmm. It can be as soon as 24 to 48 hours, and it can be as much as 4 to 6 weeks. It all depends on the input from the staff. And as I mentioned, the amount of analysis that goes into performing or providing the proposals that are submitted for the collective bargaining process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how does one, or the team rather, both the shop stewards, the works committee, along with the union representative, how do they determine what proposals go forward on that table?
Well, more often than not, although we feel the suggestions and the proposals from the wider group, we would sit down in a smaller grouping, that is the works committee, and determine, okay, is this reasonable? Do we think that we can accomplish this particular goal or this particular desire of the unit? Mm-hmm. And if there are multiple proposals on the table, which do we consider to be most proliferant, or which do we consider to be most reasonable and attainable? Now, it is also important that during the discussion that we have with our membership, Anderson, that we must set their expectations.
Okay.
I say that because more often everybody's looking for more money, and sometimes we have some interesting requests from staff as much as 25 and 50% over a 3-year period. But realistically, that might be a bit tedious and almost impossible to achieve. So we'd have to sit with the team and say, okay, what is the going market rate at the time for that particular industry? Not only that, what is the CPI index as well too? And also looking at the company's profitability. Can the company that has had substantial losses, can it be reasonable to demand 15% from them? Or should we look at a company that has had exorbitant increases? And we not even maybe look at 15%, but also 18%. So there's a bit of a strategy that goes into the collective bargaining process. And it's not really a one-shoe-fit-all type of situation.
So I'm listening, I'm learning, I'm thinking this is a much more complex process than some people might be able to appreciate, because you mentioned looking at the CPI, looking at other indicators, profitability as well. So when you speak of that, in terms of the profitability, that means that the company would allow you to look at their books for transparency? What
I can say, there are some companies that are required by law to have their financials public.
Okay.
So that is not a challenge in terms of getting those documentation. Other companies, because there's a good working relationship between the company and the union, those informations are also shared as well too. In the absence of that, we just have to go basically on what we believe and just the layman's terms. We all have an idea in regards to how well a company is performing in regards to its various market. So we use that as one of the indicators in regards to our analysis and developing proposals for the collective bargaining process.
Okay. Now, I've heard feedback from the general public. Not a lot of feedback on this particular matter, but we're a very open organization now. When we have wins for workers, new collective bargaining agreements signed, we publish them. And on a few occasions, I've seen some comments that would say, "Oh, just a 3% here and a 2% there." What is that? How far can that take an individual? How would you deal with, or how would you respond to those sort of remarks?
How I would respond to those remarks is to actually not only isolate the increase that the union would have accomplished during the 3-year period, but to look at the entire collective bargaining agreement. Because outside the salaries and wages, there are also certain financial components which the union may or may not have increased during the negotiation period. And as mentioned before, a company may not have the financial latitude to do what their members or what their employees are looking for, which is a double-digit increase, but might be only able to look at maybe a 2 or even a 3% per year.
That's just the reality, right?
That unfortunately, it is the reality.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to sit here and suggest to you that the staff are not deserving for maybe a 15, even 25% increase.
Yeah.
But we got to be real in terms of if is the company able to provide that and sustain its daily operations.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we don't wish to ever happen is that at any time we agree to a substantial increase, and as a result of that, the employer is going to say that they have to retrench the workforce because they cannot pay their wage bill.
Correct. So union officers, unions aren't just mindless individuals clamoring for unreasonable wage hikes.
We have never,
Far from it.
We have never been mindless operators. There's always some level of strategy in regards to when we sit at the collective bargaining table.
Okay. I wanted to talk a bit to us about the importance of participation from members from within a bargaining unit in the negotiating process.
That's a very interesting segue, Anderson. And I say that is that at times when we do have staff meetings, unfortunately, we don't get the turnout that we anticipate.
Okay.
And it kind of defeats the whole process of gathering proposals because most companies are divided into different departments. And as a result, the kitchen may not know what is going on in housekeeping, or maybe accounts may not know what is going on in customer service. And as a result, when we combine those proposals, a particular department may be left out when we're combining our proposals. So that is why we try our utmost best that when we do seek to gather the proposals from the team, from the employees, that we get maximum participation and attendance at these meetings.
So now we're still at the negotiating table, or rather we're back at the negotiating table. Now, in the negotiations, of course, obviously there's back and forth, give and take. At what point and how would you make that decision, if it comes to that, to abandon a particular proposal based on the resistance of the employer? Because you can't go head at loggerheads forever, right?
I wouldn't say that you can't go at loggerheads forever, because sometimes a little activity, a little bit of action may help you move the negotiation in the way that you want it to go.
Yes, yes.
What I would say in regards to that, more often than not, if a matter is placed on the table and we don't have the latitude to settle based on the mandate that we've been provided by our membership, is that we would defer the matter and take it back to our membership and have a conversation.
Okay.
More often than not, the employer would provide a reason or reasons why they're not able to accommodate the request made by the union. Now, the reason why it is important for us to take this back to the membership, we don't work for the company. So we cannot say exactly the reason or reasons that the company has provided are justified or not. So that is the reason why it is always important, if the union officer does not receive a mandate across the table to settle, that he or she takes it back to the membership and revisit their position.
And I think that again underscores the importance of members within the bargaining unit being a part of that process.
And you're so correct with that, my brother.
So now we're going a bit further. So we're still in negotiations. Now what happens if the union and the employer, they just keep butting heads, they're unable to find compromise? It may be a particular proposal item, but they've gone back and forth, they've gone back to your membership, they've gone maybe to their board of directors, and both parties are just unable to find compromise on a particular proposal item or items. Where does it go from there?
In a perfect world, we should be able to resolve our matters mutually across the table. One of the most powerful weapons that the union has is the ability to have its membership withhold its labor. And that may have to be used as a particular tool when coming across the table with the employer.
As you mentioned that, withholding labor, many of us may know it as strike action. You can clarify for me if it is the same thing.
It is more or less the same thing,
Okay.
because it may not only be a withholding of labor totally,
Yeah.
it might be a go slow
Yes, correct.
or a sick out. There are many tools that can be used.
Okay, so in industrial action, withholding labor, sick out, what is the success rate that you've found? Let's go off of your experiences in terms of being able to move negotiations forward, being able to get the employer to see a different perspective on a particular item or issue. what is the typical success rate of that sort of action?
More often than not, we're able to reach a more comfortable or more palatable result. I'm not going to say that at all times we get what we're looking for, but it actually allows the employer to come back to the table with a more reasonable position.
Okay, excellent. Now, let's talk a bit about introducing new proposal items. And one that comes to mind would be paternity leave, right? What was your experience bringing that into to contracts? Are employers have employers been resistant in the earlier days, knowing that that was an item that was, hadn't been given much consideration before, or have they been more open-minded? You've found in your experience.
What I can say, paternity leave is something that would have been quite recent, specifically for the time that I've been with the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union. Most companies, we did not receive much of a resistance in regards to introducing it into the contract. The only challenge we had was the number of days. And when we first began to introduce this particular benefit, we were looking at 5 days. Now, some companies that are predominantly male would tell you, well, they can't allow to have their male-dominated workforce out for an entire week. So they might look at 2 or 3 days. But what I can say is quite recently, we've been able to increase the 5-day paternity leave to 10 days with little to no resistance from employers.
That's great. So we're moving to from 5 to 10 days now.
That is correct. In most workplaces, quite recently.
Tell us, what are some of the biggest challenges unions face today when entering negotiations with companies?
I will say the spirit and the intent of the employer. Unfortunately, not all employers come to the bargaining table with open arms and to be quite transparent in their actions. As the representative of their employees, it is quite important that the union is aware of all of the conditions that govern the employees at the plant or at the workplace. And there are some employers that will withhold some of that information from the union officer. And that does create a significant challenge at the table. There are also some employers that will say, hey, I have no interest, I don't respect the union, I'm going to give you 0%, and I'm not going to make any movements whatsoever in any of the proposals that you submit. It all comes down to the personality and the objective of the employer when we sit down to meet. There's some that are open-minded and there's some that are closed-minded, and we just have to navigate accordingly.
I find that so interesting, given that we could say that in Antiguan business society, we should be accustomed, we have a culture of significant union density, correct?
Yes, but you still have some employers that are a bit resistant to unions, thinking that, okay, if I allow a union into my plant, into my workplace, it is going to be total chaos or anarchy. When contrary to that, the union will definitely help you put certain things in place.
Absolutely, absolutely. What have you found with respect to younger workers and their involvement in collective bargaining, in the whole collective bargaining process? Do you find that they understand, they're willing to participate as much as perhaps employees who would have been at a company for a longer period of time and would have had more exposure to the unions?
That's a loaded question, Anderson. And I'll tell you why it's a loaded question. The new workers that are coming into the workforce right now seek to benefit from gains and the sweat and diligence from the more long tenured employees. So they would not know what it means basically to take an action against an employer for maybe a simple matter as a paternity leave or a call-out allowance, a telephone allowance, a traveling allowance, because they came and met that. So that is why it's very important for the union officer to reach out to these new employees and explain to them the importance of coming to the union meeting. And not only going to the workplace and having periodic visits, it's also important for the union through its social media platforms to encourage and advise new workers, young workers, the importance of joining the union, because you never know when you might require the union. And the whole mantra, the whole idea that young people don't like the union, that is contrary. It is the fact that sometimes the union has not made itself relatable to the younger workforce. So we as a union have a lot to do in regards to basically focusing and retooling that particular workload. In the next 15 or 20 years, they're going to be the ones that basically going to be carrying the mantle. So
Yeah.
it's time now for us to indoctrinate them as to what it means to be in a properly functional unionized environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, as we wind things down, what message would you like to leave with workers about their role in supporting the union and supporting the collective bargaining process?
What I'd like to leave here this afternoon for workers in general is that regardless or not, if you're in a unionized environment or not, please support the trade union. If you're in a unionized environment, even if you have a challenge with the union officer, please attend your union meetings and express your challenges. It could be very well that the officer may not be aware that he or she might have offended you or has a particular attribute or style that you may not like.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I encourage is open dialogue. That is how we try to resolve things. And sometimes the communication barrier is what restricts us from getting or accomplishing what it is that we have on the table that we need to execute.
Mm-hmm.
For individuals that are in ununionized workplaces, what I'd like to encourage you to do, you have a democratic right and a fundamental right to be associated with a union, even if not for collective bargaining purposes, even for grievance handling, because you never know what may happen to you at your workplace. Mm-hmm. Your employer has the access to the Chamber of Commerce, the Employers Federation, consultants, and the list goes on. And most of us cannot afford a lawyer, mm-hmm. but you can probably afford paying $10 a week for someone that can represent you even better than a lawyer, yeah, at a great fraction of the cost.
Correct, yeah.
So I really want to leave here this afternoon telling all workers to be associated with a union, and by, of course, extension, the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union, which is the best union in Antigua and Barbuda.
Well said. Brother Fernando Samuel, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Workers Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Anderson.
And thank you, our audience, again for being a part of another edition of the Workers Podcast. See you again next time.